Welcome to another episode of Within Orb, and I'm here today with my friend Elodie. Elodie, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So you're coming to Within Orb from the easternmost part of North America, right?
That is correct. I'm in close to St. John's, Newfoundland.
Very cool, very cool. And I'm on the other side of the continent, but here we are to talk about astrology books. So when you started learning astrology, what was your first astrology book?
Well, my first astrology book was the internet. But Robert Hand's horoscope symbols was the first book I actually purchased.
Oh, wow.
Before that, a lot of like pop astrology type cookbook passed through my hands, but nothing I can retain now. But in 2013, I started officially studying in school to get certified, and there was a recommendation, and Robert Hand was on the list. And I guess also because I was on astro.com a lot to learn astrology, because it's a really good resource. And I had seen his name in passing at that point. And so, yeah, it's a super well delineated book. There's like basically it goes through the planets, introduction to the planets, the houses, the aspects. It's like very basic. It's what you need when you start. Although, like I was saying earlier before we started recording, beginner's book now doesn't mean the same thing as beginner's book meant even just 10 years ago. I feel like the younger generation coming through are really, really quick at absorbing information, and internet is really like speeding up the process.
Yeah, and also the trends in astrology practice have changed.
Yeah.
The thing I love about horoscope symbols, and it's awesome that you chose this one, is that it has a crystal of Rob's work with midpoints.
Yeah, he's coming through more as like I find like as a 70s type astrologer. Like there's a little bit of new age filtering through, and I think now I feel like he might change his mind about certain things that are in this book, because he's moved towards more medieval traditional things with time. But this has a little bit of a new age flavor in there.
Yeah,
which is good.
Yeah, sure. It was published in 1981, so it was definitely at the capstone of everything that had been happening in the 70s, and it was about what 12 years before Project Hindsight took off.
Exactly. Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, you can kind of see something similar, I think, in Demetra George's books, where she's talking about the asteroid goddesses, and now she's published the definitive Hellenistic astrology textbook. So
totally. Yeah, they were more like on the hippie side, I think, at that point.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay, so because you are at the easternmost tip of North American continent, I'm going to frame this question in a different way and ask you, what are the 3 books that had the most impact on you in your practice as you became an astrologer?
Okay, so The Moment of Astrology, Jeffrey Cornelius. I actually did a divination retreat with him in upstate New York in 2015 with him and his wife. And his whole approach to astrology, just from the divinatory perspective, is really still to this day intriguing to me, because we don't really have an answer about what is astrology. Fundamentally, no one can really explain it. We try to pass it through the filters of science, and it's not fully sitting right. It's not fully a language. It's not fully divinatory either, because you do need a lot of technique. But his whole, and this book, The Moment of Astrology, it's like the origin in divination. It's fundamentally something you can pick up and read again and again, because it's more coming from a philosophical perspective. There's a lot of questioning in there that it just triggers more question, which I like. And I was giving the example of, well, he gives an example in the book of why, if you go into a consultation with the wrong data, create a chart, and it resonates with the client while you have the wrong birth chart, wrong time, but the client resonates with your reading, what's happening here? Why is that valid for the person? And is that fundamentally there's a divinatory aspect to the practice of astrology that represents the moment it's happening, and and it happens for a certain reason. And I mean, understanding divination in itself is a whole other thing, but I really like that perspective of just, yeah, thinking about astrology as sort of divinatory moment.
Have you
The
had
other,
an experience of reading for a client when you got the chart wrong, but it was just right in the way that Jeffrey talks about in his book?
yep, AM and PM
Oh,
mistaken. Yeah.
very, very good.
And you know, it happens a couple of times when you begin you know, consultation. I don't know. I've talked to a lot of astrologers that it happened. I think it was like Spencer Michaud that was telling me it happened to him. So it happens a couple of times, and then it never happens again, because it's the most embarrassing thing that can ever happen. You go through an hour, you have prepared your notes, everything, only to find out that it's the wrong data. So yeah, it happened to me once with a girl. It was the wrong rising, it was wrong everything, and she resonated so hard with what I gave her for information.
Yeah,
So
but she maybe needed to have that wrong chart right then before she got the right
exactly,
one, you know?
that's what she told me, actually, because we realized after, and she said, actually, I just needed to hear this today. So
Wow. Yeah.
yeah.
I was actually asking Rob Hand, of all people, at a conference once about Jeffrey's work in this book about wrong charts working. And he turns to me with this really sort of like matter of fact grimace, and he goes, "Well, I've never seen a wrong chart work better than a right one." I was like, oh, zing. So anytime I'm talking about the moment of astrology, I always like to remember that Rob Hand quote. And I think what Jeffrey's bringing up in his work too is this beautiful way in which he's showing that horary astrology as a branch of astrological practice gives us meaningful results without being attached to the ontology of birth,
Yep.
sort of the
Yeah, exactly.
beingness of something's gestational moment is not necessarily the only way to let astrology happen in your world.
Yeah, and I think for any astrologer who learn horary, you realize how incredible horary it really is. I think like it's you cross a new threshold when once you learn horary, and you can find objects, and you can see a situation, you can see how the people are feeling from casting a chart just for this moment. I don't know if there's anything else in astrology that can top that, personally.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so moment of astrology is like impactful. It is also one of my top books, so I'm glad that you picked that one. And I love, like you brought up, how philosophically rooted it is in making one think about what are we doing when we're reading a chart, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I return to it. You return to these kind of books, and it's always giving you different information too. So, you know, it's not something, overall, in general, I don't read astrology book cover to cover personally. It's, you know, so it's more of a, yeah, like of a reference.
Yeah.
Other very impactful books for me, The History of Western Astrology by Nicholas Campion. The volume 1, particularly, there's 2 volumes. I've never actually finished volume 2. Volume 1, he starts in the Paleolithic era with lunar calendar, and for me that really changed my practice when I read that, and I'm still on this trip to this day. Having it just blew open my perspective of astrology in something that is fundamentally human, that we've been doing since forever. We've always been conceptualizing our experience through light and darkness and the movement of the planets. So for me, that was just, again, it's like a philosophical perspective that filters through, that really helps you also explain to the non-initiated, to people that are skeptical about astrology, to really take it from another angle and say, hey, listen, culture is built on our observation of the planets. Culture is built on light and darkness. we wouldn't be able to function without these things. And it's never just observational. We attribute meaning to these things. We always did. So yeah, his book is just fantastic. For those watching the video, I have like a million little page keeper and
Post-it notes are just
Post-it
exploding out
notes.
of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in his own lineage as an intellectual and as a historian, he's had to contend with skeptics. So in his writing, you can pick up on a lot of tools to navigate the people in your life who aren't going to take you seriously because you are practicing astrology. And you can turn to Nick's books and give them these historical experiences and you know, cultural moments that matter for the development of human culture writ large, right? To help navigate those conversations with people who are sort of not going to take you seriously.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's one of the angles that I really appreciate from his writing. It's just very, very well researched, very academic, but also just fundamentally, you can feel the passion for the astrology also.
Yeah. So what would be another book that had a big impact on you?
So I have chosen the Encyclopedia of Medical Astrology by H.L. Cornell. And this is, okay, so I really like encyclopedias. When I was young, I would sit at the table with the dictionary and I would just read it. I'm sure a lot of people have done that.
I did it with the German dictionary because I was trying to learn German, but
well, we did this game, this divination game with the dictionary, and we would pick words, but then also I would just sit and read the dictionary, and that's pretty much what I do with this encyclopedia. I've had a lot of people asking me medical questions and stuff. I do refer to it. The funny thing about this encyclopedia is that it's not necessarily amazing. What's amazing about it is that there's a huge compilation. Like it's pretty insane, just like the amount of information. It was written in 1933 or published in 1933. So there's a lot of outer planet delineation, which I find kind of weird. But so like attributing, you know, different physical ailment to Uranus or Neptune or Pluto, you can see that he was kind of geeking out on the outer planet. But I'm like, where did he get this info? Like, this is not tradition to a certain extent. So although when I actually get down to the basic of what's in here, it's not necessarily that the information is like exact or, you know, but it makes you think enough. And when you do have experience, you can kind of refer to it and apply your own observation also. The other thing is it's how do you say in English, like a feat, like to be able to put all of this, it's like an amazing compendium.
Right.
It truly is. There's just like everything in here. Like you can ask me anything, I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Can you do a sample divination right now? Just pick a bibliomantic passage.
In the Encyclopedia of Medical Astrology?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have a question? Or
no? Can we just see like what do we, I don't know. Does it need to have a question?
Well, divination usually, I mean, it's for you want to have a context for something. So let's ask, what is this Venus retrograde going to deliver in the collective?
Okay, that's a good enough question.
With the Encyclopedia of Medical Astrology, let's see. It's gonna
say herpes. Chlamydia.
Okay. No. Well, I picked mild illness. And then it says sea cold, mild slide. So what I would say is that it's actually going to be fairly mild in the collective compared to Pluto.
There we go. Yep. Yeah, just looking through some of these entries, sorry.
Oh, it's so fantastic. For me, what I really like about this, like I said again, is that you can see Cornell really, like, he really breaks it down. He went through literally everything and thought it out, and that's crazy to do that. Like, as an astrologer, I feel like that's so much information to put into one book. And again, I'm just like, some of it I'm like, where does he get this? Like, how does he know that Uranus does that? Like, they had just discovered Uranus. So like I said, again, it's not necessarily that the information in it itself is like fantastic, but
Yeah.
at the same time, I'm using this almost every day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of discussion about the outer planets in journals of the time and
Yeah.
magazine articles. And so we might not see that in book form, but if you look into the magazines and newsletters and various more ephemeral publications, there's a lot of discussion about the outers. Even in Germany, there's a magazine, or not a magazine, it's a almanac that has articles in it from 1931 celebrating the discovery of Pluto. And it goes, ha ha, those Hamburg astrologers thought Cupido was there, but now we know Pluto's there, so their hypothetical planet is wrong. And it's just this jab at that, competing branch of astrology. And so they were all trying to sort of figure out, like, what does this mean? And, come to a consensus in the community around the meanings of those outer planets.
Yeah, exactly. You can see that he's really trying to integrate the outer planets to his delineation, although there's still there's all the traditional stuff in there too. I had a client that had needed to have a teeth pulled, and yeah, it was mostly the work of Saturn and in Taurus in her birth chart, and I mean confirmed by this encyclopedia. So you get these hits, like very, very correct hits with that. That's why I like it, because I'm like opening it. Or somebody had shingles, and they had Mars in Leo rising, and I open for shingles, Mars and Leo on the ascendant. So I'm like, boom, so when it's like exact like that,
Very good. Very good. Yeah.
yeah.
And it seems endless. Like you could just, yeah. And always, again, like with the Cornelius book, open it and just get something totally new.
Oh my God. Like I said, I sit here and I just like look through it sometimes. I'm like, ooh, mortal illness. Okay. Overeating, interesting, imagination.
Silanthrax. Is that even how you say it?
What is that?
It's on page 954 in my copy. Yes, this is almost 1,000 pages long. It says charcoal ash ruled by Saturn. The ash in the human body is also ruled by Saturn. See ash.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And he has some case studies in there too. Death by wounds, electricity, events. Yeah,
Is electricity attributed to Uranus?
Oh, I'd say, I mean, it would be crazy
already
not
at that
to.
Point?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I'm reminded of when Uranus was conjunct one of our colleagues' sons, and he had 2 weeks of hiccups. So now I'm looking up hiccups. Yep, Uranus conjunct the moon in Cancer. Uranus afflicted in Taurus and afflicting the organ of coordination located in Taurus. So Uranus and Taurus, there should be outbreaks of hiccups everywhere.
Oh, yeah, seriously.
Yeah. Involuntary closure of glottis and interrupted spasmodic inspiration caused by afflictions in Cancer. And here we are, meeting with the Sun and Mercury in Cancer. A Cancer disease, a Moon and Uranus disease, Uranus afflicted in Cancer or Virgo and due to the erratic action of the diaphragm. Uranus conjunct the Moon in Cancer. Uranus afflicted in Taurus. Yeah.
Oh yeah, healing by electricity. People who have a strong Uranus at birth on the ascendant, like me, or well aspecting the Sun, are usually susceptible to healing influence of the healing influence of electricity. Interestingly, I am off grid and on solar panels here, so electricity is a big component of my reality, producing electricity.
Yeah, that's awesome. There it is, right? Literally on your ascendant.
That's
so
right.
Cool.
Yep. Yeah.
Very awesome. So yeah, what are some other texts that have made an impact on you that are
let me see now. So well, I do have because like I said, Horary, John Frawley, the Horary textbook. John Frawley is an institution, so anybody who practice Horary have come across his stuff, what I really like about his approach is that it's really no nonsense. So when you read Lily, there's a lot of these complications. There's a lot of superstition in Horary that are sometimes important, sometimes not so much, like late degree rising and these things where people can't agree. What Frawley's approach, and he's very efficient, he's very good, is, you know, don't waste your time with this, make it as simple as possible, focus on the question, all the rest is not important. Well, not that it's not important, but you answer the question. And so I really appreciate his efficiency. And again, for me, like, even though I started studying Horary almost 10 years ago now, I still only do Horary by donation for some reason.
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, it's that divinatory space where you have to be receptive. There's something about it, but then also you have to have the confidence, and Frawley really has that confidence. You just do it.
Yeah. I mean, you see that in his other books where he says, this is the real astrology, as if every other astrology in this room, for example, is the fake astrology, right? Like,
there's a lot of that in the astrology community.
The gutsy book title, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And then I also have the Temple of the Sky by Deborah Halding. I usually use that in tandem with anything I'm doing in my practice, especially when I'm doing astrology notes for new people that are new to astrology. Usually I will use a few of the keywords that are contained in the house book.
Yeah, Deb's book on houses is a definitive must-have in anyone's astrology library. And she does such a beautiful job of describing the way the sun moves through the sky throughout the day and how that relates to the development of the meaning of each sector.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I use that every day when I'm doing astrology. It's like how the houses are anchored in their astronomical and and from the ascendant also. That's really important, I think, in conceptualizing a chart, because then once you understand that, you understand the meaning of each house, and you can really come through your own understanding, like fundamental understanding of it. You don't need to look up, oh, what does the 10th house mean again? Because you understand that it's culminating, it's peak, top light.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely adds a kind of, that's, I would say, is like another way of adding confidence to a delineation, because you can describe the astronomy and then those qualitative words turn into, how did you know that? And you're going, I actually don't know. I'm just narrating what I see in the chart, you know? So
exactly. I'm just channeling the universe.
But following the rules while I do it, right?
Exactly. But that's why the theory is very important. That's always, I think, you get to that place of interpretation once you've assimilated the theory.
So are there any books that are in the Francophone world that English-speaking people wouldn't know about because they aren't translated into English yet that have influenced you?
Yeah, definitely. So my first one is Pluto, Pluton in French, or The Great Mysteries. And this is a publication house in France. I don't know if they're still around now. It was in the late 70s, Hades. And the cool thing about the French tradition, and when I say French, I say mostly like Belgium and France, because French Canadian have Jojo Savard, and that's a whole other category. But so the cool thing with the French tradition is they really take it in different areas. I think culturally, you know, we have existentialism, we have like, there's all of these kind of ways of thinking about reality that you don't necessarily find in English culture. So it really filters through in the way the French do astrology. So there's these angles that are taken where it's like, oh, cool, like you're not really getting that necessarily. Maybe through Rudyard, you get a little bit of that, I find. It's like a combination of like what was happening spiritually in the late, you know, I don't know, with the New Age movement and things like that. But then there's more intellectual sort of precision put on the delineation, like through the French literature on astrology. So yeah, This is a great book. Talks a lot about nuclear energy and nuclear power, which I really like. And that was a revelation for me too, like just understanding Pluto in relation to nuclear power and not just the mythology of the underworld and all of that. I don't know more recently what's being done in France so much. The reason that I usually have French astrology book is because I go to Montreal and I go to used bookstore, and then there's all of these cool books from the 70s on astrology that I just like take because they're $1. And then it's all these like really odd, like weird like theories. And I have another one, it's like the Arthurian legend, and it's like all broken down through the zodiac, and it's very, like I said, again, the intellectual sort of discipline is a little bit more refined at times, I find, with the French.
Yeah.
Sorry. And then this is not exactly astrology books, but there's this great archaeo-astronomer. Her name is Chantal Jegg, and she continues the work of Alexander Marsha, who basically said these bones, all the bones that they were retrieving from Paleolithic era sites, in the 70s, he was like, those are actually, they seem like timekeeping. People had just like labeled them as like just tools, or maybe little scratches for people are bored and they were just doing little scratches on bones. Alexander Marsha was like, no, I think those are timekeeping devices. And she continues the work. And these two books, I ordered them from her directly from her website. She signed them for me in here. And she said, basically, here is the learning of the watcher of the moon that will lead you to the meeting of your own ancestors.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What is the name of the book in French? You can, for
so
people
in
listening.
French is Le calendrier lunisolaire paléolithique de Serjac décodé. So it's basically the solely lunar Paleolithic calendar of a certain place in France, like a cave, that is decoded. And so what she does, she recreates tools, astronomical tools that have been discovered from the Paleolithic era, observed for many years, solstice, all of this, like different solstitial. And basically her whole thesis is that Paleolithic men were aware of the precession. They were keeping time very, very acutely, and they were aware of much more than we attribute them with. But I think this is arising in the collective now. I think people are starting to realize that it didn't begin in the Greek era. People, this knowledge, I think, comes and goes in cultures. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that, thinking about notches on bones as clocks. And then she went in the field and used them to make sure that they were clocks. Right.
Yeah. And there's just like, there's so much to it. It's really fascinating. These bone notches, all of them have like 29 or 28 notches. And there's some of these bone with notches are discovered all over the world, in Australia, in South America. So this seems to be like a universal thing.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, if you were going to be advising a new person into astrology land via book form and not internet or a podcast, or which texts would you recommend they encounter?
Okay. Well, I like anything by Liz Green, because she's an amazing astrologer, but also she's very good at bringing the mythology and the storytelling aspect of it. So it's a nice way to learn when you're beginning, because I find we can assimilate information better when it's through storytelling. And her whole like series with Sasportas, is it?
Yeah.
it's more like I think they were giving seminars and it's been put into book format. And the one on Venus and Mars, like it's amazing. Like it's so juicy. It's like there's real example. It's not just like dry delineations, which I do appreciate. But so when you're beginning, I find anything by Liz Green, Predictive Astrology by Bernadette Brady, The Eagle and the Lark. So this is a little bit high, you know, it's not, you don't begin here, but when you want to start doing transit stuff and progression, her work on progression is really, really good. The way she explains it, the way it's laid out. So when I started doing transit work, that's what I read, Predictive Astrology by Bernadette Brady.
The first printing edition has an amazing cover that's got just the painting of the eagle and the lark on it without the black framing.
Oh yeah,
this is from amazing. 1992.
Oh wow, yeah, I have the same image but in there.
Right, so when they reprinted it, they called it Predictive Astrology, The Eagle and the Lark. But when it first came out, it was called The Eagle and the Lark, a textbook of predictive astrology. And they just completely shifted the graphic design, probably to stimulate sales. But this is just like, so
I love that.
I don't know, it's just got a nice quality to it, texture.
Yeah, so. I love that.
Yeah, one of the fun things about exploring any of these, like going back to your horoscope symbols, if you look at the various printings of it, you can see that they changed paper so that it was thin and then it got bigger. So there's like, I'm holding up 3 copies of it, and one of them is very skinny, and then 2 of them are kind of the same size, and then one of them is got a bigger font on the spine. So you can see a lot of different things about book design and graphic design. And someone was here in the building the other day and they were like, this could be like a museum of really bad graphic design. And I just it's like, oh no.
I do think that aesthetic changes all the time. Like you were just showing the Bernadette Brady book, and I personally prefer that. So there's periods like that kind of aesthetic is popular now, like the kind of 80s aesthetic. So
yeah, everything kind of gets recycled in a way. For sure.
I don't know if I don't think other guests have talked about this one, but On the Heavenly Sphere.
That is an excellent book. Yes.
That's definitely when you're beginning, especially it's just very, very good basic. Again, like we were talking about Deborah's delineation of the houses. There's some of that here, obviously way more complex in a sense that like it talks about seasonality, which I appreciate, and the kind of this, not the seasonality of the planets, but the how do you say, the quality, like wet and dry and all of this. So, you know, it's not psychological per se. And I think when you're starting, it's nice to get that basic. So that's a really good reference book too. I also pulled out for beginner the Astrology Encyclopedia by James R. Lewis.
James R. Lewis.
And this kind of seems like, you know, whatever, but you open it and there's everything in there. Again, it's an encyclopedia kind of dictionary. So you have it, and I opened it to Nicholas Campion.
There you go.
But it's so it's in alphabetical order. There's everything, you know, galactic center to Egyptian astrology to electional astrology. It explains the terminology. You're not going to get a course in here, but if you're looking for word, obviously now we have the internet. This was published in 1993. So now you're like, oh, what is electional astrology? You look it up. But still, I really appreciate having an encyclopedia personally. Like I said, sometimes also on the internet, you're going to get lost when you search for something. You're going to get scattered in your attention. This kind of keeps it to the basic, you know.
I opened it up to Demetra George.
Yeah, there you
Demetra's even in the encyclopedia. Very cool.
Yep.
Awesome.
That's what I have for you. I mean, I
love it.
Yeah.
This is like really great. I mean, I'm in uncanny alignment with some of the selections you've made in terms of lineage and coverage, because if someone were to go and stop right now and pause the tape, get out the car, go online and just order all of these, you would be set up with a robust personal astrological library just from this conversation alone. So I really appreciate how deep and wide at the same time your mind has gone with working with astrology, from archaeo-astronomy and prehistoric roots all the way forward to things happening, right now. And thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I love talking about books. I actually have piles next to me here. There's just in case we had more time to talk about more books. I put them on this side.
Are there any screaming to be mentioned before we
the greatness of Saturn?
Okay.
Absolutely. And the astrology of sexuality.
Okay.
By Schulman. He was very prolific writer. Many books. This is fun. Everybody likes sex.
Mm-hmm. We're gonna have a whole section at Kaylee of astro smut.
Yeah.
One of our book club leader, James Dotson, came by, and he was like a fruit fly going around the room from shelf to shelf finding all of the astro smut.
I need to come and visit. I'm gonna need to do the trip across.
Yeah.
And I have the astrological body types that cracks me up so much by Judith Hill. I love looking at the little drawings of different, like the mercurial person and things like that. And cycles of becomings.
Oh, that's a good
it's
one.
It's a great book. This was my friend Nicholas Polymonakos that gifted this book to me, and again, super good.
Amazing.
The Daimon in Hellenistic astrology, a must.
You have a copy of that?
It's the draft I've printed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I have a review copy that I got as a part of
the review.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. So anyway,
we're reacting that way for everybody on listening in. We're reacting that way because the Daimon in Hellenistic Astrology was published by Brill, and it's probably at this point a $250 book.
It's expensive. Yeah. But I was interested in it because I was like, what is the Daimon? Everybody's talking about the Daimon, and this, she's the one who went kind of the deepest.
Yeah.
With that whole idea. So.
So if you could distill the sort of tweet version of the central thesis of that book, what would you say?
Oh, no, don't do that to me.
Well, you're just going to have to read all 300 pages on your own, everybody.
That is correct. Yes.
If you can find it. But it's here at Kaylee, so you can come on in and get it. So thank you for spending time with me today talking about the books you love.
Pleasure.
And I love your love of these books, and I'll look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you for having me.